I'm going to talk today about our ecosystem monitoring and education programs. I'll tell you a little bit about Columbia Lake, who we are, what we do, and then about some of our programs, and then finish off by just thanking Columbia Valley Local Conservation Fund and talking about how important they are to what we do. This is a picture of Columbia Lake. Our vision for the lake is to predict the near pristine nature of Columbia Lake for present and future generations. It's not hard to see why we would like to do that, because it's an absolutely beautiful lake, which is not very developed. And what we'd like to do is be able to pass it on to future generations in much the same shape it is now. And CLSF does that by being a citizen-based ad group for the lake. Before I go on, I'll just talk about who CLSF is. We are a science-based organization. We are very fortunate that we had scientists that were available to begin when the organization started and to this day to help us set up our programs. And that has allowed us to set up programs based on scientific protocols, et cetera. We use a lot of citizens that do a whole bunch of things for us, including citizen science, and that's very important to us. We have volunteers from all around the lake and all the lakeside communities, both permanent residents that live around the lake all the time and second home residents that come here when they can, when they want to enjoy the lake. Last year, for the first time, we counted volunteer hours, and we had over 2,200 hours contributed to CLSF by volunteers. We've also been fortunate to have summer students for 4 years, and we've had a little bit of extra money and have hired some contract employees to help us. These are just some pictures of people working for CLSF, everything from being out in horrible weather and collecting data, to sharing information, to leading groups to go around and do weed pulls and lakeshore cleanups. What I'm going to do now is talk a little bit about our program, but to be very clear, I'm just going to really touch lightly on them, and if you want more information, you can contact me by email or our website that's listed there. Our programs include lake monitoring, and we monitor for lake water quality and quantity. We also do a lot of education work, outreach and advocacy, and of course, we try to communicate our message as much as possible. We started monitoring the lake in 2014, and here's a picture of the top of Tom Dance, who is a retired hydrogeologist, and he set up our lake water quality monitoring program. And then below that is Bill Thompson, who is a retired hydrometeorologist, and he has set up our water quantity program. Now, why do we monitor, and particularly for so much about water? Well, we monitor because we want to understand potential threats to the lake. We want to understand what the water quality and quantity is now, so if things start to change, we can recognize that a change is happening. This data is available to decision makers. It means that they can know what the state of the lake was like from 2014 to 2020, and then if anything changes, they will give them that information. This will help us provide guidance to determining the appropriate measures to maintain the health of the lake and, heaven forbid, repair the health of the lake, although that's not necessarily necessary now. Water quality is the first thing I'll talk about, and in the upper right, there's a photo, an aerial photo of Columbia Lake, and on the inside it actually has the watershed where the water for Columbia Lake comes from. This shows the 4 sites that we monitor year after year, and it starts up at Columbia Park at the north end of the lake and goes right down to almost to Canal Flats as far in as we can get safely with a boat. We monitor biweekly for selected water sample for water quality indicator parameters, and monthly, so every second time we monitor the biweekly program. We also collect samples for chemical analyses. We've also done a survey of chloride, turbidity, and conductivity concentrations at 14 locations throughout the lake, which to give us more detail. We've also started measuring water quality on selected small streams, and that's going to give us some more local information. There's a picture there of a couple of citizen scientists going out and actually in the winter drilling a hole so that we could take a water quality sample in the winter, and then taking the temperature of the lake on a beautiful summer's day. What have we found out from our water quality program? Well, to date, we found out that the water quality of Columbia Lake is actually very good. It's more than acceptable for recreational, potable water, and aquatic habitat use. This is, again, a picture of some citizen scientists out on the lake collecting a water sample for us. We've also established a database, and with over 5 years of data, we've been able to establish a data range. We know what the, quote, normal is for the lake at this point, and that can help us to notice if there's any changes. We have noticed some small variations on a few parameters, chloride, pH, and conductivity and turbidity being the ones we've noticed variations in. And there's been variations along the lake as well as through time. I have to emphasize that these changes are very small and they are not of significance in terms of being outside any acceptable ranges, but they're just things that we're watching. We're going to see if they increase or decrease, or if we can understand what has caused these changes. We've also noticed when we started monitoring the streams that there are some local little variations. Again, very small, but it's just giving us a better and better understanding of what's happening with the water quality of the lake. Moving on to water quantity, this is a wonderful picture of Bill Thompson out. He will go out in all sorts of weathers, and he does a great job of maintaining all our equipment, and he's doing some work on a lake level gauge there. We have monitoring stations, and we're able to monitor the amount of water entering and leaving the lake. And if the lake level changes, we monitor the water level, we monitor temperature, wind, and precipitation. We also have a weather station, which helps us measure rainfall and estimate snow runoff. And again, we've started to monitor creeks. We know that from a water quantity point of view, the creeks will not add a lot, but they'll just help. It's good to know what the quantity is at the various places, and then it links in with the water quality. The key findings to date are that the annual rise in the lake level is due very much to water entering the lake from Dutch Creek. And in the bottom right, I'm not going to go through it in any detail, but this is the inflow and outflow from Dutch Creek, and it shows that starting in January and going through December, the flow peaks in the middle of the year in kind of June and then goes back down. We also know that groundwater is very important to the lake. It provides a year-round source of water, and that helps maintain a healthy water temperature, lake levels. It offsets evaporation. It also probably helps with water quality. We haven't really quantified that yet, but we know that it's probably significant to the water quality of the lake. One of the most important things we realized, and we kind of knew it before, but there is not an unlimited supply of water to meet future demands. Columbia Lake is a shallow lake. It's a pretty sensitive lake, and we'll have to be very aware of how much water is being taken from it, or if there's changes in the water quantity that may happen if we put too much demands on it. We also know that data are important. We now have a database, as we do with water quality, with 5 years worth of data, and that has helped us establish a baseline. That baseline is available for the Columbia Lake Management Plan, which is currently being reworked at this point. It wasn't available for both water quality and water quantity in 1997, and we're very happy to make that data available to the people that are making the decisions about the Columbia Lake Management Plan. We also do a lot of education work. We have developed and delivered three times, a watershed education program for middle school children in the Valley, and it includes a classroom and a field trip. There's a picture on the upper right of kids out learning more about their watershed. We do annual lake tours. We did two. We should have done a third this year, but of course, because of COVID, we did not. And during that lake tour, we call in experts. There's a photo here of two representatives of the Ktunaxa First Nation talking about how important Columbia Lake is to them. Below that, there's a picture of Sue going through the wetlands and the importance of the biology in the wetlands to the area. And then in the far left is Colin Cartwright, and he's talking about the headwaters of the Columbia River, which, by the way, is the headwaters of Columbia Lake, which is the headwaters of the Columbia River. And he's talking about its importance to the local community, and also giving us some great story and lore about Columbia Lake. In the middle, there's a picture from one of our boat tours, and this is a picture of Tracy Flynn showing one of our very young lakeside residents how to use one of our water quality pieces of equipment. We try to educate the public about issues that could affect the lake of the health, to understand more about invasive species, and also more about responsible boating. In terms of outreach, we try to do a lot of outreach and advocacy and communication. We engage the community members. We do shoreline cleanups, and in the bottom of this slide, there is a picture of some very tired people with a whole bunch of garbage bags around them. Those garbage bags are full of invasive species that had been pulled. We also help with bird counts. This year, we're getting very involved with the Rachel Darble's work on swallow counts on the lake, and she's surprised at the number of colonies that they found, which is very exciting. We also have developed and get signage printed for brochures and also around the lake. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a picture of our fish brochure, which our fish sign, which outlines some of the types of fish that are in the lake. We also respond to applications, which means that if somebody puts in an application for change of usage of the land or the foreshore around the lake, we read it and we ask questions about it and make sure that the decision makers have had questions asked of them about how could this impact the lake. We share resources and expertise with other groups. In the bottom left is a picture of a young woman from BC government taking a Village sample, which is a biological sample, and we provide our expertise to them. They share our information with us, and we share it back in different forms. We also help with the installation and maintenance. In the bottom right-hand corner, there's a porta potty and a set of garbage cans, which is near the place where people take their boats out along the Columbia River just north of Columbia Lake, and that helps keep the whole area clean. We also have a place there to put our brochures and offer information about the lake. And we participate in community events. Here's a picture, the one in the middle, you can probably pick it out. With Tracy and one of our former summer students dressed up. They're doing a duct tape boat race at Canal Flats at Canal Days. Our boat sank. We certainly did not win, but I think we won for best costume that year. I'd like to finish up by saying, although we get funding from a whole bunch of places, our major funding comes from the Columbia Valley Local Conservation Fund. We're able to take that funding and use a very dedicated group of volunteers to do a whole bunch and take funding from other places and get a whole bunch done for really not a lot of money. And we really appreciate the Columbia Valley Local Conservation Fund giving us the opportunity to do that.